The biting November wind cut through Katherine Baxter's thin dress as she clutched her swollen belly, watching the train disappear into the distance. Theodore's final words still rang in her ears. "I ain't raising another man's bastard." 5 months pregnant, alone, and with only $2 to her name, she sank onto the hard wooden bench of Whispering Creek's train depot, unsure if the wetness on her cheeks came from tears or the first snowflakes of the season. Katherine had been sitting at the desolate train depot for nearly 3 hours as the afternoon sun began its descent behind the distant mountains. Whispering Creek was little more than a whistle stop in the Wyoming Territory, a single street with a general store, saloon, and a handful of weathered buildings that had seen better days. The year was 1878, and the promise of a new life out west had turned into a nightmare for the 20-year-old woman who had trusted a man's empty promises. She shivered violently as the temperature continued to drop, her threadbare shawl providing little protection against the elements. The station master had locked up the depot building an hour ago, giving her a sympathetic but helpless look before heading home to his family. "Next train ain't till Tuesday," he'd told her. It was only Saturday. The sound of approaching hoofbeats barely registered through her foggy mind. Exhaustion and hunger had dulled her senses, and the baby within her seemed unusually still, causing a new wave of fear to wash over her. "Madam, you all right there?" Katherine looked up through half-frozen eyelashes to see a tall figure dismounting from a sturdy chestnut stallion. The man approached slowly, his spurs jingling with each step, a concerned expression visible beneath the shadow of his wide-brimmed hat. "I'm fine," she whispered, though her blue-tinged lips and violent shivering told a different story. The cowboy crouched down to her level, and Katherine got her first clear look at him. He was perhaps 30, with kind hazel eyes that crinkled at the corners, and a strong jaw covered by a few days' stubble. His weathered face spoke of years under the harsh western sun. "Name's Lucas Ryder," he said, his voice deep but gentle, "and begging your pardon, madam, but you don't look fine at all." His eyes drifted to her swollen belly, then back to her face. Without hesitation, he shrugged out of his heavy sheepskin coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. The sudden warmth brought tears to Katherine's eyes. "Thank you," she managed, pulling the coat tighter around herself. "I'm Katherine Baxter." Lucas nodded, his expression darkening as he surveyed the empty platform. "Where's your husband, Mrs. Baxter, or family?" Katherine looked away, shame washing over her. "It's Miss, and I don't have anyone." Understanding dawned on his face, but to Katherine's surprise, there was no judgment in his eyes, only concern and a flash of anger that seemed directed elsewhere. "You can't stay here. You'll freeze to death before morning." He glanced around the deserted street. "I've got a ranch about 3 miles out. Warm bed, hot food. My housekeeper, Widow Abernathy, she's there proper as they come." He offered his hand. "No strings attached, Miss Baxter, just Christian charity." Katherine hesitated. Every instinct told her not to trust this stranger, yet something in his steady gaze made her believe him. And what choice did she have? The baby gave a small kick as if urging her on. "I can't pay you," she admitted. A half-smile tugged at his lips. "Didn't ask you to." He extended his hand again. "What do you say?" Katherine took his calloused hand and allowed him to help her stand. The world spun momentarily and she stumbled. Lucas caught her easily. "When's the last time you ate something?" "Yesterday morning," she admitted. Without a word, he reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a slightly squashed biscuit wrapped in a handkerchief. "It ain't much, but it'll help till we get you home." Home. The word sounded foreign to Katherine's ears as she gratefully accepted the food. She'd had many places to sleep, but hadn't felt at home since her parents died of influenza 5 years ago. "Think you can ride?" Lucas asked, eyeing her condition worriedly. "I've been on a horse since I was 6, she replied with a hint of pride, her southern Georgia accent coming through. Lucas nodded approvingly and helped her mount his horse before climbing up behind her. As they rode out of town, Katherine found herself leaning back against his solid chest, his warmth seeping into her frozen bones. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to feel a sliver of hope. Lucas's ranch came into view just as the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the mountains. It wasn't grand, a modest two-story house with a large barn and several outbuildings, but to Catherine's weary eyes, it looked like paradise. A plump woman with silver-streaked hair hurried out onto the porch as they approached, her face a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Lucas Ryder, who have you got there?" she called, wiping her hands on her apron. Lucas dismounted and helped Katherine down with gentle hands. "Mrs. Abernathy, this is Miss Baxter. I found her at the train depot, half frozen. She needs a place to stay." Mrs. Abernathy took one look at Catherine's condition and clucked her tongue disapprovingly. "Lord have mercy, child. Come inside before you catch your death." She shot Lucas a look that promised questions later, but her arm around Katherine was nothing but motherly. The warmth of the house enveloped Katherine as they entered, along with the smell of fresh bread and something savory simmering on the stove. Her stomach growled audibly. "Sit, Mrs. Abernathy urged, guiding her to a chair by the fireplace. "I'll fix you a plate. Lucas, make yourself useful and bring in some more firewood." For the next hour, Katherine found herself being gently fussed over. "Mrs. Abernathy, Martha." As she insisted, Katherine called her served her a hearty stew with generous chunks of beef and vegetables, followed by fresh bread slathered with butter and honey. Lucas sat across from her, quietly observing as she ate. "You're welcome to stay as long as you need," he said when she finally pushed away her empty plate. "I've got a spare room upstairs." "Why are you helping me?" Katherine couldn't help but ask. In her experience, men didn't offer anything without expecting something in return. Lucas considered her question seriously. "My ma found herself in a situation not unlike yours long time ago. If someone hadn't shown her kindness, I wouldn't be here." He shrugged as if it were the simplest thing in the world. "Just passing it forward is all." Later that night, after a warm bath that Martha had insisted upon, Katherine lay in a clean nightgown in the most comfortable bed she'd felt in months. Her hand rested on her belly, feeling the reassuring movements of her child. "We might be okay," she whispered to her unborn baby. But even as exhaustion pulled her towards sleep, she couldn't help wondering how long this respite would last before reality caught up with her once again. The following morning, Katherine woke to sunlight streaming through lace curtains. For a disorienting moment, she didn't know where she was. Then the events of the previous day came rushing back. She dressed in her only dress, now clean and pressed, courtesy of Martha, and made her way downstairs. The kitchen was empty save for Lucas, who sat at the table with a cup of coffee and a ledger open before him. He rose when she entered. "Morning," he greeted. "Sleep well?" Katherine nodded, suddenly shy in the daylight. "Better than I have in months, thank you." "Coffee," he offered, already reaching for a cup. "Martha's gone to Sunday service in town. Said she'd be back for dinner." Katherine accepted the coffee gratefully, noticing that Lucas had already set a place for her with a plate of eggs, bacon, and biscuits keeping warm by the stove. The thoughtfulness of it brought a lump to her throat. "About yesterday," she began, feeling she owed him some explanation. "I wasn't always like this. My parents were respectable people. My father owned a small shipping business in Savannah before the war." Lucas listened quietly as she shared how her parents' deaths had left her alone at 15, how she'd worked as a seamstress for a wealthy family, and how Theodore Blackwell, the family's eldest son, had wooed her with promises of marriage and a new life out west. How his tune had changed when he discovered she was carrying another man's child, the result of a brutal attack she couldn't bring herself to describe. "He abandoned me at the depot," she finished, her voice barely audible. "Said he wasn't raising a bastard." Lucas's knuckles were white where he gripped his coffee cup. When he finally spoke, his voice was controlled, but Katherine could hear the anger beneath. "That man's no better than the animal that attacked you. Worse, maybe." His reaction surprised her. Most men would have judged her, blamed her for her circumstances. "You don't think I'm tainted?" she asked hesitantly. Lucas met her eyes steadily. "Miss Baxter, Catherine, what happened to you wasn't your doing, and that baby," he nodded toward her belly, "is innocent in all this. Don't let anyone tell you different." Something uncoiled in Catherine's chest, a tension she hadn't even realized she'd been carrying. For the first time since discovering her pregnancy, she felt something other than shame when someone looked at her. "Now," Lucas said, changing the subject as he sensed her emotion, "Martha tells me you're a skilled seamstress." Catherine nodded, grateful for the shift. "Yes, it was how I earned my living before." "Well, as it happens, folks around here are in desperate need of someone with your talents. Nearest dressmaker is in Cheyenne, 2 days' ride. Would you be interested in taking on some work while you figure out your next steps? Might help you set aside some money." Hope fluttered in Catherine's chest. "You do that for me?" Lucas shrugged. "It's good business. I'd be helping my neighbors and giving you a chance to get back on your feet. Martha's been complaining about mending my shirts for years anyway." Catherine smiled her first genuine smile in what felt like forever. "I'd be very grateful for the opportunity, Mr. Ryder." "Lucas," he corrected with a small smile of his own. "If you're staying under my roof, might as well use my given name." The next few weeks passed in a blur as Catherine settled into life at the Ryder Ranch. True to Lucas's word, orders for her sewing skills began to arrive almost immediately. Martha had spread the word at church, and soon Catherine found herself with a steady stream of mending, alterations, and even requests for new dresses from the more prosperous women in the area. Lucas set up a sunny corner of the sitting room as her workspace, complete with a beautiful oak sewing table that he claimed was just gathering dust in the attic. Catherine suspected he'd made it himself, given the fresh smell of varnish, but she didn't call him on the white lie. December arrived with heavy snows that blanketed the ranch in pristine white. Catherine's pregnancy progressed, her belly growing rounder by the day. The baby was active now, kicking and turning in ways that sometimes took her breath away. Martha fussed over her endlessly, making sure she ate well and rested regularly. Lucas, for his part, maintained a respectful distance while still checking in on her daily. He would stop by her sewing table to admire her work, sometimes bringing her small gifts, a new thimble to replace her worn one, colorful ribbons for trim, a rocking chair that appeared mysteriously one morning for when the little one comes. Catherine found herself watching for him, looking forward to their conversations. Lucas was unlike any man she'd known, thoughtful, well-read despite his frontier upbringing, and genuinely interested in her opinions. He never made her feel like a charity case, always treating her with a respect that warmed her more than any fire could. One evening, as Christmas approached, Catherine sat by the fireplace finishing a delicate lace collar for Mrs. Peterson, the banker's wife. Lucas entered quietly, dusting snow from his coat. "Still at it?" he asked, hanging his hat on the rack. "It's nearly 9. Catherine smiled up at him. "Just finishing. Mrs. Peterson is paying extra to have it by tomorrow." Lucas settled into the chair across from her, warming his hands by the fire. He watched her work for a few moments, her nimble fingers guiding the needle with practiced ease. "You're truly gifted," he said softly. "My mother was a fine seamstress, but I've never seen work as delicate as yours." Catherine felt a blush warm her cheeks at the compliment. "Thank you, it's satisfying work." She tied off the final stitch and held up the collar for inspection. "What do you think?" "Beautiful," Lucas said, though his eyes weren't on the lace. "Mrs. Peterson will be pleased." Their gazes held for a moment longer than necessary before Catherine looked away, her heart fluttering in a manner that had nothing to do with the baby's movements. "I've been meaning to ask you something," Lucas said, leaning forward slightly. "The Christmas social is next Saturday at the town hall. Would you—" The front door burst open, bringing in a gust of cold air and a snow-covered Martha. "Land sakes, it's coming down something fierce out there," she exclaimed, stomping snow from her boots. "Catherine, dear, I've brought you those buttons you wanted from the mercantile." The moment between Catherine and Lucas dissolved, but she caught his look of mild frustration as he rose to help Martha with her packages. Later that night, as Katherine lay in bed, her hand resting on her active baby, she allowed herself to acknowledge the feelings she'd been trying to ignore. She was falling in love with Lucas Ryder, his quiet strength, his kindness, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. It was foolish, she knew. What man would want a woman in her condition, carrying another man's child? Yet her traitorous heart refused to listen to reason. What Katherine didn't know was that across the hall, Lucas sat at his window watching the falling snow, thinking of honey-colored eyes and gentle hands, wondering if it was too soon to speak of feelings that grew stronger with each passing day. The Christmas social arrived with perfect winter weather, crisp and cold but clear, with stars twinkling overhead like diamonds on velvet. Katherine had initially refused to attend, certain she would be the subject of whispers and judgment, but Martha and Lucas had been insistent. "Folks around here have been ordering your work for weeks," Martha reasoned. "They know your character by now. Besides, you can't hide away forever." In the end, Katherine relented, spending precious hours creating a new dress for herself from a bolt of deep green wool Lucas had brought back from a trip to Cheyenne. She'd added ivory lace at the collar and cuffs, and cleverly designed the bodice to accommodate her 7-month belly without drawing undue attention. When she descended the stairs that evening, Lucas was waiting at the bottom, dressed in his best clothes, clean dark trousers, a pressed white shirt, and a vest that emphasized his broad shoulders. The look of appreciation that crossed his face when he saw her made Katherine's breath catch. "You look beautiful," he said simply, offering his arm. The town hall had been transformed with pine boughs, red ribbons, and dozens of candles. A fiddler played cheerful tunes in the corner while townspeople chatted in groups, cups of mulled cider in hand. To Katherine's surprise and relief, she was welcomed warmly, with several women immediately complimenting her dress and introducing her to others. "Your fine stitching saved my Sunday best just in time for today," declared Mrs. Wilson, the telegraph operator's wife. "I've been singing your praises to anyone who will listen." Lucas stayed close by, occasionally placing a protective hand at the small of her back when the crowd pressed too close. His presence gave her confidence, and for the first time since arriving in Whispering Creek, Katherine felt like she might belong. As the evening progressed, the fiddler called for couples to form sets for a country dance. Lucas turned to Katherine with a questioning look. "Would you honor me with a dance? Something slow," he added, glancing at her condition. Katherine hesitated. "Are you sure? People will talk." "Let them," Lucas replied with a small shrug. "I've never much cared what others think." The music began, a gentle waltz that allowed them to move at a comfortable pace. Lucas's hand was warm against hers, his other resting respectfully at her waist. As they turned slowly around the floor, Katherine felt as though they were in their own private world, despite the curious glances from onlookers. "I never thanked you properly," she said softly. "For what? For everything. For finding me at the depot that day. For giving me a home, a purpose again." Lucas's gaze was steady, earnest. "You don't need to thank me. Having you at the ranch has been." He paused, searching for the right words. "It's felt right, Katherine, like you were meant to be there." The intimacy of his words made her heart race. "Even with all my complications?" she asked, glancing down at her belly. Lucas's hand tightened slightly on hers. "Your baby isn't a complication, it's a blessing." Katherine was saved from responding by a sudden commotion at the entrance to the hall. All heads turned to see Theodore Blackwell standing in the doorway, his expensive coat dusted with snow, his handsome face flushed with what might have been cold or alcohol. Katherine froze, her hand instinctively going to her belly. Lucas followed her gaze, immediately noticing her distress. "What is it?" he asked quietly. "It's him," she whispered. "Theodore." Lucas's expression hardened as understanding dawned. Before he could speak, Theodore spotted Katherine across the room, his eyes widening before narrowing in recognition. "Well, well," he called loudly, silencing the music and conversation. "If it isn't Katherine Baxter." Still carrying that bastard, I see. Shocked murmurs rippled through the crowd. Katherine felt the blood drain from her face as every eye turned toward her. Lucas stepped protectively in front of her. I think you should leave, he said, his voice quiet but carrying an unmistakable threat. Theodore laughed, the sound ugly and slurred. And who might you be, the fool who took in my leavings? Several men in the crowd shifted uncomfortably, and the sheriff moved closer, clearly sensing trouble. I'm the man who's giving you one chance to walk out of here with your dignity intact, Lucas replied evenly. Miss Baxter is under my protection now. Theodore's face darkened. Protection. Is that what they're calling it these days? Did she tell you that brat she's carrying isn't mine? That's she told me everything, Lucas cut him off. Including how you abandoned a pregnant woman at a train depot as winter was setting in. Now I'm not asking again. Leave. Theodore's hand moved toward his waistband where a pistol was visible. I don't take orders from ranch hands. Before the situation could escalate further, Sheriff Morgan stepped between them. That's enough, Mr. Blackwell. We don't want trouble here. This is a Christmas celebration. Theodore glared at Katherine over the sheriff's shoulder. This isn't over, he spat, before turning and stomping out into the night. A heavy silence fell over the hall. Katherine felt dozens of eyes on her, full of questions and judgment. Shame washed over her and she wished the floor would open and swallow her whole. Then Martha was at her side, taking her arm. Come along, dear. Let's get you some air. As they moved toward the side door, Katherine heard Lucas addressing the crowd. Folks, I apologize for the interruption. Now I believe we were in the middle of a celebration. Outside, in the quiet cold of the starlit night, Katherine let the tears fall that she'd been holding back. I'm so sorry, she whispered to Martha. I've brought scandal to you and Lucas. Martha squeezed her hand. Nonsense, child. That man is the only one who should be ashamed. Besides, she added with a small smile, folks around here have plenty of respect for Lucas. His word carries weight. As if summoned by his name, Lucas appeared at the doorway. Are you all right? He asked, concern evident in his voice. Katherine nodded, wiping away her tears. I should have known he might come back. I'm sorry for causing a scene. You didn't cause anything, Lucas said firmly, and you have nothing to apologize for. He hesitated. Would you like to go home? Home. There was that word again. And despite everything, Katherine realized that the Ryder Ranch had indeed become home to her in ways she'd never expected. No, she decided, straightening her shoulders. I won't let him ruin this evening, not after Martha spent hours making those gingerbread stars. Lucas smiled, relief and admiration in his eyes. That's the spirit. He offered his arm again. Shall we? When they re-entered the hall, the music had resumed, and while there were still curious glances, many people made a point to smile warmly at Katherine. Mrs. Wilson even came over to ask about commissioning a christening gown for her newest grandchild. The rest of the evening passed pleasantly, though Katherine noticed Lucas scanning the room periodically, as if expecting Theodore to return. When it was time to leave, he kept her close by his side all the way to the wagon, his eyes constantly surveying their surroundings. The ride home was quiet, with Martha dozing in the back of the wagon under a thick buffalo robe. Snow began to fall again, soft and gentle, muffling the sound of the horses' hooves. Do you think he'll cause more trouble? Katherine finally asked, breaking the silence. Lucas considered the question carefully. Men like that usually make a lot of noise but have little follow-through. Still, I'll speak with Sheriff Morgan tomorrow, let him know the situation. Katherine nodded, grateful for his assurance but still uneasy. She'd seen the cold fury in Theodore's eyes, recognized the wounded pride. Men like him didn't take public humiliation lightly. As they approached the ranch, Lucas suddenly tensed beside her, his hands tightening on the reins. What is it? Katherine asked, alarmed. There's a light in the house, he said quietly. We didn't leave any lamps burning. Katherine peered through the falling snow and saw he was right. A faint glow came from the parlor window. Fear coiled in her stomach. Lucas stopped the wagon a short distance from the house. "Wait here with Martha," he instructed, reaching under the seat for his rifle. "Keep your head down." "Lucas, no," Katherine protested, grabbing his arm. "It could be him. He was drinking, he's armed, all the more reason for you to stay put," Lucas replied, his expression grave but determined. "I won't risk you or the baby." Before she could argue further, he had slipped down from the wagon and disappeared into the shadows, moving with surprising stealth for a man his size. Katherine shook Martha awake, quickly explaining the situation in whispers. The older woman's eyes widened with alarm, but she remained calm, reaching into her handbag to produce a small derringer. "Lucas's father gave me this years ago," she explained, checking that it was loaded. "Never thought I'd need it, but I always keep it with me." The minutes stretched interminably as they waited, straining to hear anything over the soft hiss of falling snow. Katherine's heart pounded so loudly she was certain it could be heard for miles. Suddenly, a shot rang out from the direction of the house. Katherine gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Martha's grip on the derringer tightened. "We need to help him," Katherine whispered frantically. "Child, in your condition," Martha began. "I can't just sit here," Katherine interrupted, already moving to climb down from the wagon. The baby chose that moment to deliver a particularly strong kick, as if in agreement. Martha hesitated, then nodded grimly. "Stay behind me." They moved cautiously toward the house, using the falling snow as cover. As they approached, the front door swung open and both women froze. Lucas stood in the doorway, rifle in hand, looking unharmed. "It's clear," he called quietly. "Come inside quickly." Relief made Katherine's knees weak as they hurried toward the house. Inside, the parlor was in disarray, furniture overturned, Katherine's sewing table dumped on its side, her carefully organized fabrics and threads scattered across the floor. "Theodore?" Katherine asked, surveying the damage. Lucas nodded grimly. He ran out the back when he heard the wagon. "I fired a warning shot, but he disappeared into the trees." He ran a hand through his hair, his expression troubled. "He was looking for something. Your room's been searched too," Katherine frowned, bewildered. "I don't have anything of value." "Maybe not, but he seemed to think you did." Lucas's eyes were grave. "Katherine, did Theodore ever give you anything? A gift, a letter, something he might want back?" Understanding dawned slowly. "The ledger," she whispered. "Before we left Savannah, I saw him arguing with his father about money missing from the company accounts. Later, I found a small ledger among my things. I thought he'd placed it there for safekeeping." Her hand went involuntarily to her throat, where a small key hung on a thin chain, usually hidden beneath her clothes. "I never mentioned it to him." "Where is it now?" Lucas asked urgently. "Hidden in the lining of my carpet bag, in the wardrobe." They hurried upstairs to find Katherine's room in shambles, but the wardrobe had apparently defeated Theodore's search. With trembling fingers, Katherine retrieved her old carpetbag from its depths, locating the hidden pocket she'd sewn into the lining. The small leather-bound ledger was still there. Lucas took it carefully, flipping through the pages. His expression grew increasingly grim. "These are false accounts," he said finally. "From what I can tell, Theodore was embezzling from his family's business significant amounts. If his father found this, he'd be disinherited at best, possibly arrested," Katherine finished. "No wonder he was so desperate to find it." "This makes him more dangerous," Lucas said, closing the ledger. "He won't give up easily now that he knows you have this." Martha, who had been quietly setting the room to rights, spoke up. "You should take this to Sheriff Morgan first thing tomorrow. Let the law handle it." Lucas nodded in agreement. "In the meantime, I'll stay up tonight, make sure he doesn't come back." His eyes met Katherine's, full of concern. "I won't let anything happen to you. Either of you," he added, glancing at her belly. That night, despite her exhaustion, Katherine found sleep elusive. She could hear Lucas moving quietly through the house, checking windows and doors. Twice she heard the floorboards creak outside her room as he passed by on his vigilant rounds. Near dawn, she finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, only to be awakened by the sound of raised voices downstairs. Alarmed, she threw on her robe and hurried to investigate, finding Lucas at the front door speaking with Sheriff Morgan. "Tracks lead north toward the territorial border," the sheriff was saying. "I've sent telegraphs ahead to alert the authorities in Dakota Territory, but with this snowfall covering his trail." "What's happened?" Katherine asked, coming down the stairs. Both men turned, and Lucas moved immediately to her side, his hand gentle on her elbow. "Sheriff Morgan came to inform us that Theodore broke into the telegrapher's office last night, sent a wire to his father, then stole a horse and fled town." The sheriff nodded grimly. "Whoever this Blackwell fella is, he's in a heap of trouble now. Horse theft alone carries a serious penalty out here." "He was desperate," Katherine said quietly. "The ledger proves he stole from his family's business." Sheriff Morgan accepted the ledger when Lucas handed it to him, thumbing through it with a whistle. "This explains a lot. I'll keep this safe, might be needed as evidence if they catch up to him." He tipped his hat to Katherine. "Madam, I'd suggest staying close to home for a while, just as a precaution. Desperate men do desperate things." After the sheriff left, Lucas insisted Katherine rest, but the day's events had left her too agitated. Instead, she focused on restoring order to her sewing area, salvaging what materials she could. Lucas worked alongside her, righting furniture and retrieving scattered threads and buttons. "I'm so sorry for bringing this trouble to your home," Katherine said as they worked. "Perhaps it would be best if I found somewhere else to stay. I wouldn't want to put you or Martha in danger." Lucas straightened, his expression serious. "Katherine, look at me." She did, reluctantly meeting his gaze. "This is your home now for as long as you want it to be." His voice was firm, brooking no argument. "I meant what I said last night. I won't let anything happen to you or your child." The intensity in his eyes made her heart flutter. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do you care so much?" Lucas stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his hazel eyes. "Because in the short time you've been here, you've become important to me, more important than I thought possible." Katherine's breath caught. "Lucas, I know the timing is all wrong," he continued, his voice low and earnest. "You're still healing, still preparing for your child. I'm not asking for anything. I just want you to know that you're not alone, and if you'll allow it, I'll be here for both of you in whatever way you need." Tears welled in Katherine's eyes, but for once, they weren't tears of fear or sorrow. "I don't know what to say," Lucas smiled gently. "You don't need to say anything. Just know that you have a place here always." He hesitated, then added, "And when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'd like the chance to show you how much you've come to mean to me." Before Katherine could respond, Martha called from the kitchen that breakfast was ready. The moment passed, but something had shifted between them, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing since that first day at the train depot. As January turned to February, life at the Ryder Ranch settled into a new rhythm. No further news came of Theodore, though Lucas remained vigilant, never letting Katherine venture into town alone. Her sewing business continued to flourish, with orders coming in steadily from as far away as Laramie. Katherine's pregnancy progressed well, though the baby grew increasingly active, often keeping her awake at night. During one such restless night, she made her way downstairs to make a cup of chamomile tea, only to find Lucas already at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee before him, staring thoughtfully into the fire. "Can't sleep?" he asked, rising to pull out a chair for her. Katherine shook her head, placing a hand on her belly. "Your future cowhand is practicing for rodeo already." Lucas smiled at the phrase, "your future cowhand," a warmth filling his chest that had nothing to do with the fire. Over the past weeks, he'd found himself increasingly thinking of Katherine's baby as his own in a way that both surprised and pleased him. "May I?" he asked hesitantly. Gesturing to her belly, Katherine nodded, taking his hand and placing it where the baby was most active. Lucas's eyes widened in wonder as he felt the strong kicks against his palm. "That's amazing," he whispered, his face alight with awe. "Hello there, little one." The tenderness of the moment brought tears to Katherine's eyes. This man, who owed her nothing, had opened his home and his heart to her and her unborn child. In that moment, she knew with absolute certainty that she had fallen in love with Lucas Ryder. "Lucas," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "What you said before about showing me how much I mean to you." His eyes met hers, careful but hopeful. "Yes, I think I'm ready to hear it now." Lucas took her hand, his thumb gently caressing her knuckles. "Katherine, I've known many women in my time, but none like you. Your strength, your grace in the face of adversity, it humbles me. I find myself thinking of you first thing in the morning and last thing at night." He paused, his eyes never leaving hers. "I love you, Katherine Baxter. I love your spirit, your gentle heart, and yes, I already love this child you're carrying." Katherine's heart soared at his words. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I have since you wrapped me in your coat that day at the depot, though I was too afraid to admit it, even to myself." Lucas brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her palm. "I don't want to rush you, we have all the time in the world." Katherine smiled through her tears. "The baby will be here in less than a month. I'd hardly call that rushing." Lucas laughed, a deep, joyful sound that warmed her more than any fire could. "Fair point, but my offer stands. I want to be a father to your child if you'll let me." "I can't think of anyone I'd rather have by my side," Katherine replied, her voice full of emotion. Their quiet moment was interrupted by Martha's voice from the doorway. "Well, it's about time you two sorted yourselves out. I was beginning to think I'd need to lock you in the root cellar together." They looked up, startled, to find the housekeeper standing there in her dressing gown, a knowing smile on her face. "Martha," Katherine exclaimed, blushing. "Don't Martha me, young lady. I've watched you two dance around each other for months now." Old eyes see clearly, even if they need spectacles for reading. Lucas chuckled, not releasing Katherine's hand. "Well, Mrs. Abernathy, since you're here, I might as well make it official." He turned back to Katherine, his expression suddenly serious. "Katherine Baxter, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Katherine's free hand went to her mouth in surprise. Though they had just confessed their love, she hadn't expected a proposal so soon. "Are you certain?" "With the baby coming and all the complications, I've never been more certain of anything," Lucas interrupted gently. "I want to be your husband and a father to your child. I want us to be a family." Tears of joy spilled down Katherine's cheeks as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you, Lucas Ryder." Martha clapped her hands in delight. "Praise be. Now, when shall we have the wedding? Before or after the little one arrives?" Lucas looked to Katherine questioningly. "Before," Katherine decided with surprising certainty. "I want our child to be born into our family, proper and complete." The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Word spread quickly through Whispering Creek about the upcoming nuptials, and to Katherine's surprise, the community's response was overwhelmingly supportive. Women she had sewn for brought gifts for both the wedding and the baby, while the men of the town helped Lucas prepare the ranch for the coming spring, a gesture of respect that moved him deeply. Reverend Townsend agreed to perform the ceremony at the ranch, understanding Katherine's desire for a quiet celebration given her advanced state. Martha threw herself into preparations with gusto, baking and cleaning as if the president himself were coming to visit. On a clear, cold Saturday in mid-February, Katherine stood in her room, examining her reflection in the mirror. She had used the last of her finest ivory silk to create a simple but elegant wedding dress that accommodated her 8-month belly without trying to hide it. Her honey-colored hair was arranged in a simple knot at the nape of her neck, adorned with small white flowers that Martha had somehow managed to procure despite the season. A soft knock at the door preceded Martha's entrance. The older woman stopped, her hand going to her heart. "Oh, my dear," she whispered. "You look absolutely beautiful." Katherine smiled, turning to face her friend. Over the past months, Martha had become the mother she'd lost years ago. "Thank you for everything." Martha waved away her thanks, blinking suspiciously bright eyes. "None of that now, or we'll both be red-eyed for the ceremony." She approached, holding out a small box. "I have something for you, something borrowed, as the saying goes." Inside the box lay a delicate silver bracelet with a single pearl. "It was my mother's," Martha explained. "I wore it at my own wedding, and I'd be honored if you'd wear it today." Catherine's throat tightened with emotion as Martha fastened the bracelet around her wrist. "I'll treasure it," she promised. Downstairs, the parlor had been transformed. Pine boughs and winter berries adorned the mantel, and someone had brought early forcing paper-white narcissus that filled the room with a sweet fragrance. A dozen or so guests waited, the closest friends Lucas and Katherine had made in Whispering Creek, along with a few of Lucas's ranch hands and their families. Lucas stood by the fireplace with Reverend Townsend, looking handsome in a new black suit that Katherine had secretly altered to fit his broad shoulders perfectly. When the music began, Mrs. Wilson playing Beautiful Dreamer on the parlor piano, all heads turned toward the staircase. Katherine descended slowly, one hand on the banister, the other cradling her belly. The baby, as if sensing the importance of the moment, gave a gentle kick of acknowledgement. Lucas's face when he saw her was something Katherine knew she would remember for the rest of her life, a mixture of awe, love, and promise that made her heart swell with happiness. He stepped forward to meet her at the bottom of the stairs, taking her hands in his. "You are radiant," he whispered. The ceremony itself was brief but heartfelt. Reverend Townsend spoke of new beginnings, of God's providence in bringing them together, and of the sanctity of the family they were forming. When it came time for their vows, Lucas's voice was strong and sure, his eyes never leaving Katherine's as he promised to love, honor, and cherish her all the days of his life. Katherine's voice trembled slightly as she repeated her own vows, overcome by the journey that had brought her from despair at a lonely train depot to this moment of pure joy. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Townsend declared. "Mr. Ryder, you may kiss your bride." Lucas cupped Katherine's face gently, his thumbs brushing away the tears of happiness that had escaped. "I love you, Mrs. Ryder," he murmured, before leaning down to kiss her with a tenderness that spoke volumes. The small gathering erupted in applause, and even the most stoic of the ranch hands could be seen discreetly wiping their eyes. The celebration that followed was simple but joyous. Martha had outdone herself with the wedding feast, and the cake, 3 tiers of spice cake with buttercream frosting, was declared the finest ever tasted in Whispering Creek. There was music and dancing, though Lucas insisted Katherine rest frequently, hovering over her with such devoted concern that it became a source of gentle teasing from their guests. As twilight fell and the last guests departed, Lucas swept Katherine into his arms, ignoring her protests that she was far too heavy. "Nonsense," he said, carrying her effortlessly up the stairs. "I'm going to carry my wife over the threshold properly." He took her not to her room but to the master bedroom, which had been transformed. Fresh linens adorned the large 4-poster bed, and a fire crackled merrily in the fireplace. On the bedside table stood a vase of winter greenery and a small wooden cradle. "Lucas," Katherine breathed, touching the cradle's smooth edge. "Did you make this?" He nodded, setting her gently on her feet. "Been working on it in the evenings. There's a proper crib too, but I thought this might be useful for the first few weeks, keeping the baby close by." Katherine's heart swelled with love for this man who thought of every detail, who had embraced her and her child so completely. "It's perfect. Everything is perfect." Lucas drew her into his arms, mindful of her belly between them. "You've made me the happiest man in the Wyoming Territory today, Katherine Ryder." The name, her new name, brought a fresh smile to her lips. "And you've given me a home, a family, a future I never dared hope for." Later that night, as they lay together in the quiet darkness, Katherine nestled against Lucas's side, his hand resting protectively over her rounded belly. They spoke of their dreams for the future of the ranch, of the children they might have together, of the life they would build. "I never believed in fate before," Lucas murmured, his fingers tracing gentle patterns on her skin. "But when I think of all the circumstances that had to align for me to find you that day at the depot." Katherine nodded against his shoulder. "A different day, a different time, and we might never have met. Then I'm grateful for every choice, every path that led us here." He pressed a kiss to her forehead, even the painful ones. They fell asleep that way, wrapped in each other's arms, the promise of tomorrow bright before them. 2 weeks after the wedding, in the early hours of a March morning, Katherine woke with a gasp, her hand flying to her belly as a powerful contraction gripped her. "Lucas," she whispered, shaking her sleeping husband gently. He was instantly alert, sitting up and lighting the bedside lamp. "Is it time?" Katherine nodded, trying to breathe through the pain as Lucas had read they should do in the midwifery book he'd purchased in Cheyenne. "I think so. My water broke." Lucas was out of bed in an instant, pulling on his clothes and boots. "I'll fetch Martha and ride for Mrs. Guthrie." The local midwife lived about 3 miles away, but was known for her skill and gentle manner. The next 12 hours were a blur of pain, determination, and the steadfast support of those around her. Martha stayed by Katherine's side throughout, bathing her forehead with cool cloths and murmuring encouragement. Mrs. Guthrie arrived within the hour, her calm competence reassuring as she examined Katherine and declared everything progressing normally. To Katherine's surprise, Lucas refused to be banished to the parlor as was customary. "She's my wife, and that's my child," he told Mrs. Guthrie firmly. "I'm staying." The midwife raised an eyebrow but didn't argue, merely instructing him on how to support Katherine's back during contractions. His presence was a comfort beyond measure, his strong hands steadying her, his voice a constant anchor as the pain intensified. "You're the strongest woman I know," he whispered during a particularly difficult contraction. "You can do this, Katherine. Our baby is almost here." Just as the sun was setting, casting long golden rays through the bedroom window, Katherine gave a final, powerful push, and their child slipped into the world with a lusty cry that filled the room. "A girl, Mrs. Guthrie announced triumphantly, quickly wrapping the squalling infant in a soft blanket. "And a healthy one at that." Lucas, who had been supporting Katherine from behind, leaned forward to see his daughter, tears streaming unashamedly down his face. "She's perfect," he breathed, "Mrs. Guthrie placed the tiny bundle in Katherine's arms. Looking down at her daughter's red, wrinkled face, Katherine felt a love so powerful it took her breath away. The baby had a shock of dark hair like her biological father, but when she blinked open her eyes, they were a clear, familiar hazel. "Look at that," Martha marveled, peering over Katherine's shoulder. "She's got your eyes, Lucas." Lucas seemed unable to speak, his finger gently tracing the curve of his daughter's cheek. Finally, he found his voice. "What shall we name her?" Katherine looked up at her husband, her heart so full it might burst. "I was thinking of Elizabeth Martha Ryder, Elizabeth for your mother and Martha for the woman who's been like a mother to both of us." Martha gasped softly, her hand going to her heart. "Oh, my dears." Lucas nodded, his expression solemn with joy. "It's perfect. Hello, Elizabeth," he whispered to the baby. "Welcome home." As the midwife and Martha bustled about, cleaning up and preparing a light meal for the new mother, Lucas sat on the edge of the bed, one arm around Katherine, the other cradling their daughter. "Thank you," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "For what?" Katherine asked, leaning against his shoulder, exhausted but radiant. "For trusting me that day at the depot, for giving me a family." He pressed a gentle kiss to her temple. "I promise you both, I will spend the rest of my life being worthy of the gift you've given me." Katherine looked up at him, at this man who had saved her in every way a person could be saved. "We saved each other," she said simply. 3 years later, Katherine stood on the porch of the Ryder Ranch, watching Lucas chase a giggling Elizabeth around the yard. At nearly 3, their daughter was a whirlwind of energy and curiosity, with her mother's golden hair and her father's determined spirit. "Papa, higher," Elizabeth demanded as Lucas swooped her up into his arms, spinning her until her laughter echoed across the ranch yard. Katherine cradled her second child, 4-month-old James Lucas Ryder, against her shoulder, smiling as he gurgled happily at the sound of his sister's delight. The ranch had prospered under Lucas's careful management, and Katherine's seamstress business had grown to include a small shop in town where she worked 3 days a week while Martha watched the children. Life wasn't without its challenges. There had been drought the previous summer, and a particularly harsh winter had claimed some of their livestock. But through it all, the love and partnership she and Lucas had forged only grew stronger. Theodore Blackwell had never returned to Whispering Creek. News had eventually reached them that he'd been arrested in Bismarck for fraud and horse theft. His embezzlement from his family's business finally caught up with him. Katherine had felt a momentary pang for what might have been, but no regret. That path had led her here to this life that exceeded her wildest dreams. Lucas approached with Elizabeth still in his arms, the little girl's cheeks flushed with excitement. "Mama, Papa says we can go fishing tomorrow," Katherine laughed, reaching out to smooth her daughter's wind-blown hair. "Did he now? And what about your promise to help me with the garden?" Elizabeth's face fell momentarily before brightening again. "Garden first, then fishing. That sounds like a fine compromise," Lucas agreed, setting the child down. "Now, why don't you go help Martha gather eggs for supper?" As Elizabeth skipped off toward the henhouse, Lucas stepped closer to Katherine, gently taking James into his arms. The baby immediately grabbed for his father's shirt buttons, a favorite pastime. "You look beautiful today," Lucas said, leaning in to kiss her softly. "Have I told you that?" "Only twice so far," Katherine teased, straightening his collar. "You're falling behind schedule." He laughed, the sound as warm and comforting to her as it had been the first time she heard it. "Well, we can't have that." "Katherine Ryder, you are the most beautiful woman in the Wyoming Territory, and I fall more in love with you every day." Katherine's heart swelled with happiness as she looked at her husband and son, at the prosperous ranch around them, at the life they had built together from such unlikely beginnings. "Do you ever think about that day?" she asked softly. "At the train depot." Lucas nodded, his expression turning thoughtful. "Often. It was the luckiest day of my life finding you there. Even though I was pregnant and weak and had nothing to offer," she teased gently, though the memory of her desperate situation still had the power to move her. "Especially because of that," Lucas replied, his voice serious now. "You showed me what real strength looks like that day, and every day since." He shifted the baby to one arm so he could wrap the other around her waist, pulling her close. "I thanked God then for guiding me to you, and I thank Him every day for the family we've made." Katherine leaned her head against his shoulder, watching as Elizabeth chased a butterfly through the tall grass, her joyful laughter carried on the spring breeze. From the desperate young woman abandoned at a train depot to the confident wife, mother, and businesswoman she'd become, the journey had been remarkable. "I love you, Lucas Ryder," she said, turning to face him. "Yesterday, today, and all our tomorrows." His kiss was as tender as the one he'd given her that first day when he'd wrapped her in his coat. But now, it held the depth and certainty of a love tested by time and strengthened by shared joy and hardship. As the sun began its descent behind the mountains, casting long golden shadows across their land, Katherine thought there could be no greater blessing than this, a life built on second chances, strengthened by unwavering love, and rich with the promise of many happy years to come. In the distance, the whistle of the evening train echoed through the valley, the same train that had once carried her to this place in despair. Now, it was simply a familiar sound of home, a reminder not of what she had lost, but of all she had gained in this beautiful, unexpected life.